Each week on Culinary Confidential, Christina Cates, a seasoned foodie who has worked at some of New York City's top restaurants, will share her passion for the culinary world. Whether you're a professional chef, a restaurant enthusiast, or a lover of good food, Christina dives into the heart of hospitality, exploring the trends, triumphs, and challenges facing the food service profession. And you won't want to miss her chats with some of the most interesting and influential industry voices. And now, please take your seat at the table as Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates starts now, exclusively on AM 970. The Answer.
Welcome to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates. This show is produced in association with my dear friend, Lucas A. Ferrara. I'm continuing with the Spotlight on Chefs series with a very well-known and widely respected chef in the industry. Let me paint a picture and see if you can figure out who I have on the show tonight as my special guest. The chef is an Italian-American, Brooklyn-born New Yorker through and through, and studied at the New York City College of Technology before embarking on a culinary career. He wanted to be an actor, though, and did that for about 8 years before he trained at the infamous Culinary Institute of America in New Hyde Park. He's worked at renowned restaurants such as Le Cirque and the 21 Club before taking the helm at Windows on the World. He is an author, restaurateur, and television personality known for his expertise in American cuisine. He's appeared on various television programs and even had his very own show on the Food Network. If you're listening out there and you guessed Chef Michael Lomonaco, then you are exactly right. I had the pleasure and the privilege of meeting Michael earlier this year at his amazing restaurant, Porterhouse Bar and Grill, which is located in Columbus Circle. And by the way, the view from this restaurant is one of my favorites in New York. Michael came over to my table and spoke with my friends and I and sent us out some amazing appetizers from the kitchen. His genuine warmth and hospitality were infectious. I said to myself that night, Michael Lomonaco is coming on Culinary Confidential, and he doesn't even know it yet. Michael has had a very rich career in the hospitality industry, working at some of New York's classic restaurants. He is part of the fabric of what makes the restaurant scene in this city so extraordinary. It is my absolute honor to have him on the show tonight. Chef Michael Lomonaco, welcome to Culinary Confidential. It is such a pleasure to have you on the show tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here because, this is the kind of a show that we all have fun with and appreciate.
Yes. All right. I want to talk about the early days, your background and growing up in, the heavy Italian-influenced Brooklyn neighborhood that you grew up in. Can you talk about that?
No, I've been sworn to secrecy. As you just said, I was born in New York City, in Brooklyn, right? So Brooklyn is Brooklyn, and the city is Manhattan. The city is the city. Brooklyn, and it was a mixed neighborhood. It was Italian-American, it was Irish, it was German, it was Jewish. It was all of these different cultures. There were pockets of African-American families, and I went to public school all the way through high school, even City University.
Right.
And, I just feel like this, New York City is not only my home, it's not only where I was born, but it's the place I love the most. And I grew up with a love for food because food is a big part of the Italian-American experience.
Absolutely.
And, all cultures bring their food favorites to America, and we adopt them. We all adopt those different food cultures and make it part of our own. But we had a big backyard. So we had a big yard that my father grew vegetables in.
Oh, I love
summer.
that.
Yeah, we had a grape arbor. We had grapes that were really, they really weren't very good, but there were a lot of them. We had peach trees and raspberry bushes and fig trees. The fig trees are a thing with Italian Americans because mostly these fig trees came from Italy in the 30s and the 20s, and they were planted, and they're still there today in these backyards all over Brooklyn and Queens and even Staten Island. So, food was really at the core of my childhood, my experience.
I think that's amazing. I had no idea about the fig trees in Brooklyn. Maybe you'll have to take me sometime to your old haunts and see them. Now, it's just interesting because Brooklyn is so hip right now with the dining scene. I mean, you think of places like Greenpoint and Williamsburg. It's just a bustling restaurant vibe there. Is that interesting to you for someone who grew up in Brooklyn?
It's amazing to me. there was a time where they would say, 1 out of 4 people in the United States could trace their roots to Brooklyn. We grow them and then we send them out across the country. I don't know if that's true anymore, but I will say this, that it really has had an impact all over the world. So you see Brooklyn T-shirt. I travel to Europe. I'll go to Italy or France, and I'll see Brooklyn T-shirts on people who are not from Brooklyn.
Right.
It's great. Well, Brooklyn has so much to offer. It was, as you know, historically it was once its own city and then incorporated in the late 19th century into New York City. The Brooklyn Museum, the Brooklyn Academy of Music. It has great arts centers and close to the water, so there's always been fishing there. On the water, really. And Brooklyn still excites me. I still go regularly to visit. I'm a Manhattanite now.
Yeah.
And that's more because of the restaurant business than anything, because it's just closer to home after a shift in the restaurant to go home at night. So it's a little easier commute. But I'll say that I make regular visits to Brooklyn. Yes. And not just to the hip neighborhoods, although I do that. I think Williamsburg, all these rediscovered, yes, you can criticize the gentrification, but it's also the reinvention, and that's kind of what New York does. New York reinvents itself regularly.
I'm actually going to Brooklyn this upcoming weekend. I am someone who doesn't go to Brooklyn a lot because I live in Jersey. So, for me, I push my way into the city and then I don't want to push across and get out over to Brooklyn. So I kind of stay in Manhattan proper. But I am venturing to Brooklyn this weekend to go to Industry City. There's a new restaurant opening with 2 guys. They work together at Roberta's, which everyone knows Roberta's, the pizza place in Brooklyn. Yeah. They opened a place together called Confidant. So I'm going to check that out because it's newly opened. So that's my big adventure for the weekend. But yeah, I'm going to try to do a show all about the dining scene in Brooklyn with, Gray Coons, the famous chef Gray Coons. His son, Jimmy Coons, I've become very friendly with. He was on the show. He has some restaurant concepts, and he just opened up a pizza place called Rita's in Greenpoint. So I'm going to get some Greenpoint places.
Sounds great.
Maybe you can come back on and co-host that with me because you're full of fun facts about Brooklyn, which I wasn't prepared for. But
well, you asked.
That's right. I love it.
So we had our garden where we had vegetables throughout the summer, but in the late summer and end of August, we always got bushels of tomatoes to make tomato sauce to put up in jars for the winter. And
classic Italian guy over here.
Yeah, we had these peach trees where the peaches weren't great, but if you got them before the worms did, which my father tried to, we could put those up in sugar syrup for the winter. And that sounds like Brooklyn of old, but I just think that there's so much of that in today's world. Preserving food, making pickles, preserving fruits and vegetables. I think it's still a very current topic. So
absolutely.
It was kind of how I was raised, yeah.
Especially in a post-COVID world where people kind of had to a little bit fend for themselves during that time. And people got interested in preparing food more at home and preserving things because things just weren't so readily available to people when they needed it.
Yes, absolutely. If my mom and dad were alive today, they might have chickens because people have chickens, right?
Yes.
I'm not even sure if you're allowed to have them, but
some places you're not. In New Jersey, where I live, you're not allowed to have chickens because we looked into it.
And in the boroughs, you're not allowed either.
Yeah.
But it was a great childhood. It was.
It sounds it. All right, you've worked with some really big names in the industry, notably French chef Daniel Boulud, but it was your meeting with famed chef Patrick Clark that truly inspired you to become a chef. I'm interested to know more about what it was like to work with him because he was legendary at Tavern on the Green, and I worked at Tavern on the Green. So by the time I got there, he was no longer there, but people would always say to me, like, oh, Patrick Clark was the greatest chef we ever had. So tell me, why was he so inspiring to you?
Well, I'll try to condense the story, but I was a theater rat when I was a teenager, and when I was in my 20s, I was an actor. I was acting. I was an actor. I was studying. I was auditioning. I was doing shows and doing bit parts in films and all of those things. And I was also driving a cab. I had to make a living. I was a stagehand. I did quite a number of day jobs.
Yeah, you were a hustler.
you have to pay your rent.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did was drive a cab, and it was in driving a cab that I picked up a fare one night, and I knew who I was picking up even before he got in the cab. I was picking up Patrick Clark.
Whoa.
And he was leaving work where he was at the Odeon downtown, which is still a great place.
Yes.
And I was picking him up outside of the Odeon, and I took him back to his home in Brooklyn. He was staying at his mom's house out in Brooklyn, and I got to know Patrick on that 40-minute drive. Even though he was exhausted from a full day of work, he was very generous and gregarious and open. And I asked about cooking, and I had an interest in food. I had a deep interest in food. It was my passionate hobby, home cooking, cooking at home, being adventurous and trying different things at home, not just the dishes that I learned in my mother's house, but, cooking Asian food and Chinese food and trying Indian dishes and French dishes from Julia Child's book. And so Patrick and I talked about food and restaurants in that ride, and he got me so excited about changing my life and becoming a chef. And I went to New York City College of Technology, which is the school that Patrick graduated from. And Patrick was really one of our most noted African-American chefs in the mid-'80s, early '80s, who really made a name for himself. He was, reinventing American food while he was learning. He had learned classic French cuisine in France and come back to America and really developed his own style and his own point of view. So we became friends sort of slowly. I went to school the next year. I enrolled at City Tech, which is what we call it, and it's still there. It's a great school that teaches a lot of different trades and crafts, but craftsmanship. But hospitality was my department, and that's what Patrick had graduated from. And we became friends as I graduated and went out into the world to be, to sort of follow this path to becoming a chef.
That's incredible.
He was a great influence, but he was also a great friend and somebody I looked up to for all of my years that I knew him. And we were friends until his untimely passing.
Right. Well, he certainly made an impression in the industry.
Oh, yeah.
You wanted to be an actor. We talked about this. You went to theater
I was
school.
An actor.
Right. You did it for 8 years, right. I believe, right?
Well, it's sort of like that. Yeah, that's what I was doing. It's a tough road, but I'll tell you that being creative is something I never wanted to give up on, being a creative person, but also being doing something for others. And I think that hospitality drew me to it. Cooking drew me to it because it has a front of house, a back of house. It has an audience who are the guests and a way to connect with them and be creative in a way that pleases them or offers them something new or offers them something familiar that they feel good about. So, yes, exactly.
So you had your show on the Food Network, Michael's Place, and you were also the host of Epicurious, which was on the Discovery Channel. Do you feel like your time as an actor, helped you when you were in front of the camera on those shows?
Absolutely.
You're a natural.
I don't know about that, but it was a big help. I felt very comfortable with it. Michael's Place ran for 3 years on the Food Network, and it was it was a different Food Network than it is now.
Yes.
It was an early Food Network in the late 90s, and they were trying to find their way, and now they have different kinds of programming. But in that day, it was really cooking on the set and cooking things that I love to eat, but I love to cook. But also, I really enjoy showing sort of other people how to cook or what my technique or my skill, whatever my skill set is, to show people and encourage them, because it's a great, passionate engagement to be cooking for other people. And I enjoy sharing that with the audience. And Epicurious was a different kind of programming. There was in-studio cooking, but there was also travel segments that were food and travel segments that are very popular still to today.
So I want to switch gears for a minute. What do you think about the non-existent dress code that's in restaurants these days. Like, I know you've worked at some super high-end places where there was a strict dress code, jackets required for men, and that is kind of slipping away into the sunset in the New York City dining scene. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's everywhere that more casual dress has become, acceptable in all settings. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, the things that make restaurants important to our day-to-day life is the hospitality, the welcome, the ability to be in a restaurant at whatever level it is, to relax, convivial atmosphere. And I think that dress codes are a thing of the past in many ways, and not only in New York, but I find it everywhere. And I travel a little, and I don't see a lot of ties. Gentlemen wear jackets, but without a tie. Also, fashion has changed so much. I mean, that's a good thing, and anything that makes people kind of be creative for themselves, and that's how their own identity is based on how they dress and present themselves to the world, I think that's cool.
I love that answer. I wasn't expecting that from a classic guy like Michael Lomonaco, classic New York guy. But that's very fresh. I like it.
I'll tell you the truth, though. I'll go to, and it depends on the restaurant. If I go to something new and kind of, I hate to say upscale, but, if I go to someplace, actually, when I go to restaurants, and I tend to put on a jacket as just for myself, as a show of respect to the ownership and to the chefs who run the restaurant.
Thank you.
It's just my style. I might wear jeans and a pair of construction boots, but...
Business on the top, party on the bottom. All right, Chef, we have to go to commercial break. Stay tuned. You're listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970, The Answer.
Over the last 30 years, Newman Ferrara, a New York City law firm, has evolved into a national practice focused on real estate, commercial, litigation, civil rights, class actions, and other complex litigation, representing many of the city's largest property owners, managing agents, and thousands of tenants. Newman Ferrara handles some of the nation's most significant class actions and civil rights matters. Newman Ferrara at 1250 Broadway in New York City. Go online to newmanferrara.com. That's newmanferrara.com. Listen to the firm's name partner, Lucas Ferrara, every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Dottie Herman's longest-running real estate radio program, Eye on Real Estate on AM 970. A real estate lawyer for 35 years, Lucas is a professor at New York Law School and is also a published author with books on real estate and New York's landlord-tenant law. Tune in Saturdays at 10 a.m. to hear Lucas's unique perspective and advice on Eye on Real Estate.
Welcome back to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970, The Answer.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning into the show, I'm joined tonight by celebrity chef Michael Lomonaco, owner of one of my favorite New York City restaurants, Porterhouse Bar and Grill. Chef, I know this is going to be difficult, but I do want to talk a little bit about your time at Windows on the World, if that's okay.
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Windows on the World, it occupied the 106th and 107th floors atop the North Tower of the World Trade Center. It was and will forever be the jewel of New York City dining. Tragically, on September 11th, 2001, 79 employees of Windows on the World lost their lives due to the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. Chef, you had an incredible strike of luck that fateful morning. Can you share with us the events that happened that morning that prevented you from being at the restaurant at that time?
Oh, well, yes, of course. Let me just say that talking about Windows on the World and the events of September 11th, 2001 are important to me because it's how we keep the memory alive of all the people who lost their lives on that day.
Yes.
Not only the people who work there or were visiting there or were in the building for one reason or another, but all of the first responders. This is how we keep their memory alive. We need to talk about it. We need not to forget about it. I worked at Windows for just a little bit over 4 years, which was the last 4 years of its existence there.
Correct.
And it was an absolutely incredible experience where I made some of the best friends of my life there, and I lost some of these great relationships and friends on that day and colleagues. But it was, of course, it was a very important experience to me as a chef, as a restaurant operator, to have spent those years there. On that morning, and not unusual, but I always had a habit of being at work early. I mean, restaurant operations require long days of work. It's not unheard of. So in that case, I would go to work 8:30 in the morning and be at work for the entire day and not leave until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and sometimes later, depending on what was happening. So that day was no different for me. I was there at 8 a.m., 8:15, and was headed to my office, which was on the 106th floor, when before I got on the elevator, I decided that I would actually pop into an ophthalmology shop that was there that sold eyeglasses and reading glasses and things like that. And I had reading glasses that had broken, and I needed to replace my glasses. And that's what I did on that morning. Just by happenstance, I decided that I need to get this done. Let me get it done now, first thing in the morning, so it doesn't intrude on the rest of my day.
Thank God you
did. That's where I was. Yeah, that's where I was when the first plane struck. And I was minutes away from leaving. The doctor was just about finished with me, so I would have been heading to the elevators within the next 5 or 10 minutes from the time from where I was at that moment. And that would have meant that I was going up to my office and to walk through the kitchens when the first plane struck. I was still in the ophthalmology shop. So,
that gives me chills.
There are a lot of stories that are similar to that. People in the street who were headed to work, or people who had, gotten stuck taking their kids to school, or were stuck on the train or a subway. But it changed my life. It saved my life. Right. But it also gave me the opportunity to try to help others. And, we lost 79 people that morning. We lost 72 in the restaurant that worked there. We lost some construction people who were building a wine cellar for us, 79 people who were working. But there were guests in the restaurant that morning for the breakfast club, because we had a private club there. We operated in the mornings and at lunchtime, and there were a number of guests who were there that morning. So the tragic occurrence of that day is burned into my memory, and of course I'll never forget it. But when I think of my friends that I lost and their families, I also think of this is how we remember them. We remember them for all of the good they brought to the world.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, you're very lucky. That's all we can say. You're the luckiest chef in the world.
I am in many ways, and I'm happy to be here. We began a foundation after that, the Windows of Hope Family Relief Fund, which a number of restaurant people came together, and the restaurant community, not only in America, not only in the United States, but around the world, supported and made donations and raised money. And within a year, we had raised about $22 million for the families of the food service workers who were lost on that day. And not all of them were at Windows. There were companies within the World Trade Center that had people who worked making breakfast or making lunch. There was a hot dog vendor on the street. There were other food service workers. There were about 105 food service workers and about 252 family members who lost someone on that day. So we raised enough money to help them with emergency aid in the beginning years after 2001, and it eventually evolved into a scholarship fund, and it exists to today, where it's provided scholarship money for those family members. And many of them have gone on to college and gone through graduate school, and even spouses and partners were able to access the funds. So, the restaurant world at large really helped those families, and that's the positive thing that came out of this, that we were able to...
The silver lining, yeah. I mean, that's amazing. Everything you're committed to doing. I mean, it's very inspiring, Chef. I do want to talk a little about Windows on the World, specifically your career there before 9/11. You've been credited with revitalizing the overall menu and dining experience at Windows on the World. Previously, the menu, it was largely French cuisine, right? But you came on board and gave it a modern American flair, and you were utilizing fresh and locally sourced ingredients, giving it just, a little bit of a fresher taste. Do you remember any of the menu items that you added at that time that gave it a splash?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for that. Windows on the World opened in 1976, and Joe Baum was the restaurant impresario who opened Windows in 1976. And in that day, when it opened, it was a restaurant that I aspired to dine in one day. It was such a hot ticket to get into that restaurant. It was so aspirational to travel up to the 107th floor and look out over New York City and dine. I never did get up there as a guest in those days. But even as I was driving a cab in New York City, I wanted to go to Windows, and particularly to go to Cellar in the Sky, which was a 35-seat luxury restaurant that they had there as well. So it was something that was always a part of, for many years, have been a part of my, sort of my image of New York City and what New York restaurants were about. And when I went in 1997, it was following the reopening. In 1996, the restaurant had been completely rebuilt, completely redesigned, and it reopened after being closed for 3 years because of the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, which closed the restaurant, forced its closure. It reopened in 96. It had a very varied menu, yes, French, but it had a sort of a global cuisine idea, which is fine and can be very exciting, but it didn't seem to be working. And what I brought there was my sense of American food, American cooking, and how inspired and creative American chefs are, particularly based on what's fresh, what's bountiful, what's in season. And that's where we turn the menu to American, this really, with some regional influences. American food has regions of this country where the food is very specific to the Northwest or to the South or the Southeast or New Orleans or the Northeast. And being able to bring those dishes and reinvent some of those dishes was really what I attempted to do, and we were successful at it. We really were able to make Windows on the World a major destination dining spot for those 4 years that I was there. They were great years. They were great years for me and for the restaurant.
You've been quoted in saying, "My mandate as chef director at Windows was clear. It was to transform it from a restaurant with a view to a restaurant and a view." And I think you did just that. Chef, we need to head to our last commercial break. Stay tuned. You're listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970 The Answer.
Over the last 30 years, Newman Ferrara, a New York City law firm, has evolved into a national practice focused on real estate, commercial, litigation, civil rights, class actions, and other complex litigation, representing many of the city's largest property owners, managing agents, and thousands of tenants. Newman Ferrara handles some of the nation's most significant class actions and civil rights matters. Newman Ferrara at 1250 Broadway in New York City. Go online to newmanferrara.com. That's newmanferrara.com. Listen to the firm's name partner, Lucas Ferrara, every Saturday at 10 a.m. on Dottie Herman's longest-running real estate radio program, Eye on Real Estate on AM 970. A real estate lawyer for 35 years, Lucas is a professor at New York Law School and is also a published author with books on real estate and New York's landlord-tenant law. Tune in Saturdays at 10 a.m. to hear Lucas's unique perspective and advice on Eye on Real Estate.
Welcome back to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates on AM 970. The Answer.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning into the show, I'm joined this evening by American chef, author, and restaurateur Chef Michael Lomonaco, and he's the owner of my favorite New York City restaurant, Porterhouse Bar and Grill, which is a 250-seat restaurant with sweeping views of Central Park South. Chef, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Christina. It's great to be here, really.
All right, let's talk about Porterhouse, because we didn't really touch too much on it yet, which in 2006, I believe, it was in the top 100 of America's best restaurants. I mean, that's pretty cool, don't you think?
Yeah, yes, I do. I have to just say my partners, who are really the owners of the restaurant and the developers of the Time Warner Center and Hudson Yards, they really propelled this with me. They made this happen. This is a collaborative effort. So when I came to this building, to this space, to open a restaurant, it was really with my partner, Ken Himmel, who's a restaurateur, a real estate developer, and we collaborated on a restaurant on the fourth floor. We're on the fourth floor of the building, which is funny because actually it's more acceptable today to open on an upper floor than it was even 15 years ago. Now, we opened 18 years ago, and we've had a terrific run. We've been very fortunate with the guests who come here. Porterhouse, that's two separate words, Porterhouse. I named it Porterhouse, New York, and eventually the name kind of evolved into Porterhouse Bar and Grill. It's named not for the steak, which would seem obvious that it's the steak because we sell a lot of porterhouses.
Right.
But it was named for 19th century American porter houses, which were really bars and grills that were all over Manhattan, lower Manhattan, particularly near the Fulton Fish Market, where there was all active trade in lower Manhattan, near Wall Street. And these porter houses sold porter, which is a good, rich beer, really like a beer, but it's porter, and steaks. And those steaks eventually became known as Porterhouse steaks, and that's where we get the name for a porterhouse steak. But they were known for their hospitality, for their welcome of the stranger, for their welcome to the guest, that anyone who comes through the door is no longer a stranger but a friend of the restaurant. A friend of the restaurant is what I wanted everyone to feel like when they came to Porterhouse Bar and Grill. And we've been here for 18 years, and we really, in my mind, we're an American grill, but really we're an American steakhouse in so many ways. We sell prime USDA dry-aged prime beef, but we've also always done duck and quail and venison and local fish, flounder and striped bass when it's in season. And the idea of so many of the ideas that work at Porterhouse, actually I've been part of my life even since Windows on the World, because at Windows we had a little boutique restaurant up there that was called Wild Blue, and Wild Blue was like a miniature version of Porterhouse in so many ways. Conviviality, hospitality, great food, great beverages, great drinks, great wine list, excellent service. I mean, these are the things that make people feel welcome and comfortable. Right. And dress however you like.
I always get dressed up for the occasion, though. I mean,
well, I like that. That's great. I think that's great.
That's
right.
Hey,
listen, when you're going out, go out and have a good time.
Exactly.
For so many of us, is the entertainment for the night.
That's right.
People, used to use restaurants to come early and go to a show or go to a movie or go to the opera or go to ballet or come after. Like people, would come for a late night supper. Even at Windows, they did that after shows. But now restaurants are really the thing. They are the thing.
They are the main event.
Right. Exactly.
So I want to talk a little about, the New York City steakhouse culture, because that is a vibe. I'm a huge steakhouse fan, even though I'm not the person that actually goes there and orders the steak. In your opinion, what defines a great steakhouse?
Great question. I hope that Porterhouse Bar and Grill does that. It defines a great steakhouse.
Oh, it absolutely does. You wouldn't be here tonight, Chef, if it didn't.
I know that's a little self-serving, but what I mean to say is those are our goal. And our goal is to provide the warm welcome. I think that this is a New York steakhouse, idea, that the warm, convivial atmosphere that a steakhouse implies, that people are welcome from everywhere, and that this is where now you're a friend. It's very important to make people feel that comfortable. And steakhouses, I think, do that because we're very accustomed, even at Porterhouse, we're very accustomed to large tables, 10, 12 people come together. A lot of restaurants don't want to do that, seat large tables.
Right.
But
that's so true.
The more the merrier. Great steaks, well, I define great. Every restaurant will define it differently, but for me, it's USDA prime beef. And our prime beef is hormone-free and antibiotic-free. Now, we've gone through a whole period of time now where people have kind of discovered or rediscovered grass-fed beef.
Yes.
But, all cattle is grass-fed. It's only in the last 2 or 3 months before the cattle is harvested for market that anything other than grass is fed to them. That's where the grain comes in. And the grains are what will put the fat onto the cattle, and that's what will make it from choice beef into prime beef. The more fat it puts on, the more marble that's within the beef is because of that feeding period of the last 2 or 3 months. So grass-fed beef is delicious, but it's different. USDA prime beef, American prime beef, we get travelers, and I hate calling them tourists because it sounds derogatory, but we get travelers from all over the world who come to New York looking for American prime beef because it's a different experience from the beef in France or Spain or
Definitely.
Italy or anywhere in Europe. Yeah.
That's
and
true.
even in Asia, Japanese Wagyu, we have Japanese Wagyu in our menu. We offer that as well. So we offer Australian Wagyu, Japanese Wagyu, as well as the American beef. But it's the, it's the precision cooking of steaks, of beef steaks, that has really captured the imagination of chefs because the public knows what a great steak is, and chefs have discovered over the last couple of decades that precision cooking of this one thing, a beef steak, takes time, it takes effort, it takes expertise, and the guest appreciates the time put into it. And that's why you have so many steakhouses now that are now owned and run by chefs, because it's not below us to cook something as simple as a beef steak as long as you do it precisely and perfectly every time. So a great steakhouse also offers a variety of dishes, and I always tell people, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you want the best in that food, you're probably going to find it in a steakhouse because we have so many different vegetable dishes on our menu that a vegetarian can dine very easily and very well here. And seafood dishes are a part of that tradition. Steakhouses, I was talking about the porterhouse customs of 19th century New York, and that's really where steakhouses grew from those porterhouses here in New York City. And in the turn of the century, of 20th century, from the 19th to 20th century, beef steak dinners, they were the political fundraiser dinners that we know today. They started as beefsteak dinners in the early 20th century. And so if you were invited to a beefsteak, there was sure to be 200 people there who were raising money for their candidate, but it would be fun and it would be boisterous and people would sing and there would be music and beer and steaks. And I think that this is what defines a New York steakhouse.
Oh, I love it.
A fun, delicious experience.
My background is at the Palm Restaurant also. So I worked in an Italian steakhouse for a lot of my career, and I would say that was some of the most fun nights of my life, is working in a steakhouse. The people that come in there, they want to come in, they want to spend money, they have great energy. So I'm all about the steakhouse. But I need a book from you. I need Fun Facts by Michael Lomonaco. You have so much information upstairs. I need it.
Well, I talk too much sometimes, but I do love what I talk about. So, eating and steaks and wine and food and more than anything, the guest. The guest is the most important part of it. And that's what steakhouses do. And that's what Porterhouse Bar and Grill does. We really focus on the pleasure and the pleasure and the great experience that we want our guests to have.
That's how I met you. I talked about this in the intro a little bit. I met you at Porterhouse. You came over to the table. You were so warm and genuine. I mean, I've talked a lot about this on the show about working in hospitality, but being genuine in your delivery, because people can see when someone's not genuine or not, and you have that. I mean, it radiates off you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much.
if it wasn't for
Thank
that fateful night, we wouldn't be doing the show here tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So we're nearing the end of the hour, Chef. I do want your opinion on something. The trend right now is luxury for less, right? We see things like, places like Cocodoc that have the chicken nugget with the caviar, or Nubaloo's does the caviar bump for like a more approachable price. What's your take on that? And are you going to incorporate anything like that into your restaurant?
I don't have anything negative to say about that. I will say the positive thing is this is what's fun for restaurant operators. They're always looking for something to attract their guests because really it's about differentiation. We have to differentiate ourselves from the steakhouse down the street or the restaurant down the street or around the block.
That's right.
And my feeling is as long as we're not sort of taking advantage of the guest, but really giving them something good and delicious and fun, then go for it. Just do what you do. Trends do come and go, and I'm not sure how I feel about any particular trend at any time, but I always, caviar and things like that are being reinvented for reasons. In my early days of being a chef, I sold caviar I had caviar on my menu at New York's 21 Club, and we sold it by the ounce out of a 3-pound tin of caviar. And caviar has been reinvented because so much wild caviar is no longer available to us, and there's a lot of really good farm-raised caviar out there. So people are, going to this luxury product, and, luxury is in, but, don't forget the masses is how I feel about that.
Chef, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I can't wait to do this again with you, whether you like it or not.
Christina, you were great, Christina. Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here with you, and I wish you all the best with Culinary Confidential because it's a great show, and you're a terrific person.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Culinary Confidential with Christina Cates, Sunday nights at 9 p.m. on AM 970 The Answer. Tune in next week for an amazing show I have lined up. I'm joined by Chef Scott Lindquist. He's the founder of the global brand Pollo Taco. Now, who better to highlight the Mexican cuisine for the Cinco de Mayo show than him? Hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Thanks for listening and have a great night.
The preceding program is sponsored by Shake It Off Live, LLC.